Okay. Good afternoon, Councillor Travis-Stott. We can start the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting of Conway County Borough Council meeting, where we are all attending remotely. I'm Councillor Travis-Stott, and I will be chairing the meeting. Before we begin, could I please request for a minute's silence in respect of the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Thank you. In addition to committee members, we also have officers joining us to assist with our discussions, together with public speakers for some of the planning applications being considered, who will be introduced at the appropriate time. For those viewing the live stream / recording, committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. Can I check that everybody can hear me? Thank you. Can I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice. If you wish to speak, please use the raised hand function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note, I may not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. All microphones will be muted. If you have indicated your intention to speak, I will invite you, to turn your microphone on. If you leave your device for any reason, can you please ensure that you are muted and that you turn your video off? We will take things slowly so every application gets due consideration. If we now move on to the agenda, the first item is apologies for absence.
Yes, Councillors Sue Lloyd-Williams and Dave Roberts. And just to let you know, members, Councillor Austin Roberts is having technical issues, so he is desperately trying to join.
Yeah, thank you. Second item is declaration of interest, the Code of Local Government Conduct. Members are reminded that they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interests. Has any members got any declaration of interest? Okay, we'll move on to item 3, which is urgent
Chair,
matters.
Councillor Peter Lewis and Councillor Alan Hunter.
Sorry, Councillor Peter.
I declare a personal and prejudicial interest in respect of 048082. The applicant is known to me socially.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Allen?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just a personal interest in 0/48264, the radio mast in Abergele. I'm a member of Abergele Town Council, and that came to council, our statutory consultees. I took no part in any discussion about it. In fact, there's no observations from the Town Council, so it's just a personal interest.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pauline?
Hi, I'm the same as Councillor Alan Hunter. I'm a member of Abergele Town Council, and we're statutory consultees, but I took no part in any discussion or made no observations about it. So just a personal.
Thank you, Councillor Pauline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is urgent matters. I'm not aware of any, but these are notice of items which, in the opinion of myself, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. So we move on to item 4. It's the minutes to approve and sign as a correct record of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 10th of March 2021, and the special planning committee meeting on the 25th of March 2021. Could I have a proposer and a seconder that we accept those minutes, please?
Mae gynnig.
Councillor Phil and Cwmgarydd Tristan. Well, thank you, members. Will members show you can use the raised hand facility, or if you just indicate to me that you accept the minutes. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. If we now move on to item 5, it's to consider the following reports. And the first one is code reference 0/46945. It's the restoration of 3 listed stone barns and conversion as 11 dwellings, demolition of 2 modern steel extensions, demolition of steel barn and replacement with garages and stores, and re-landscaping of the site at Melai Barns, Bedwin Road, Llanfairpwllgwyn, Abergele. And we do have speakers for this, so I will now introduce the first speaker, which is Mr. Peter Davison, which is speaking against the application. Mr. Davison.
Councillor Scott, councillors, officers, I've been asked by the local community that surround the proposed development to talk. Our principal concerns and objections are that the proposals, can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt you. Can I just remind you, in case you weren't aware, you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Principal
remind you when you've 30 seconds.
Okay, principal concerns are that the proposal presents flood risk up and downstream from the development, is not in character with the immediate area, and is not suitable for residential accommodation, and is not the only way forward for that particular site. Since we received the additional reports, etc., we've reconnoitred the route of Nant Melai to its source. The water has a tendency to run into deep-sided ravines, and these collect and form a torrent as it works its way down. The hydraulic model is based on, and we're concerned about this, 1941 to 1970 data. And in recent years, the extent of rainfall has increased, the intensity and duration. If we look at the consequences of flooding in the flooding consequences report, intense weather events have occurred, and upstream or on the length of Nant Melai, a number of bridges have required repair, some by the county council, etc., about 6 in the last 2 or 3 years. This talks to the torrent that this now forms, as it's not a quiet little babbling brook. If we look at the flooding consequences report, it shows the water flooding above the bridge to the south of the property into the cattle sheds owned by Messrs Williams of Henfleys Farm. The water does not currently go into those sheds. At the moment, the sides of the sheds and the parapet direct the water to the east and then around, and it then vents itself down through the gap between the stone barns. We are concerned that if the parapet is removed, as recommended by the mitigation proposals, the water will now commence to flood into those cattle sheds and put Messrs Williams' farming operation for beef at considerable expense, and having to perhaps relocate those sheds and the silage clamp and the slurry tank associated with them. The model doesn't specifically speak to those impacts. And
20 seconds.
we find it inadequate. Likewise, we are concerned that the area is a working farm, and the use will be incompatible with it being in the middle of a working farm. Likewise, also that we are concerned about future actions being taken by future residents against Messrs Williams and the
Thank you.
operation.
The 3 minutes are up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Thank you. Okay, I will now invite Mr. Aled Williams, who's speaking in favour of the application. Mr. Williams, you also have 3 minutes to address the committee, and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining.
Okay,
When
thank
you're
you.
on time.
So the site comprises listed buildings together with outbuildings, which have previously been used for agricultural purposes. The listed buildings are now surplus to agricultural requirements and have been vacant for a long period. Without planning and listed building consent for a new use, it's likely that the condition of the buildings will deteriorate further. The planning authority has previously authorised conversion of these buildings under its consent numbers 038145 and 038146 back in 2012. In light of flooding, we acknowledge that consideration must be given to paragraph 6.1.11 of Planning Policy Wales, which states that the application of planning and listed building controls should recognise the need for flexibility, where new uses have to be considered in order to secure a building's survival or provide it with a sound economic future. So it's acknowledged that the site falls within flood zone C2, and that flood risk is definitely a key consideration for this planning application. Waterco consultants have been instructed and have undertaken a hydraulic modelling assessment and flood consequence assessment in support of the application. And that assessment provides a detailed analysis of existing flood risk and investigates flood risk mitigation measures which can be incorporated to reduce future flood risk. We acknowledge the recently received NRW correspondence with some queries regarding the model, but point out that they have accepted the hydrology assessment, which is a calculation of the peak flows into Nant Malai. So the primary flooding is water entering the eastern extent of site through gaps in existing walls along the eastern bank of Nant Malai, and flooding is exacerbated by blockages of road bridges immediately upstream and downstream of the site. So in order to reduce the flood risk to the development, we have proposed an engineered flood defence wall, and that wall comprises improvements to existing wall along with new sections of wall along Nant Malai. And there's also modifications to bridge parapet to encourage water over wall rather than around it, and as such reducing the conveyance of flood water towards the actual buildings. So with the mitigation in place, the flood wall and removal of the parapet, the listed buildings are flood free during a 1%, so 1 in 100 annual probability, plus 30% climate change event, which is required to comply with A1.14 of Technical Device Note 50 in the Planning Policy Wales.
30 seconds.
We acknowledge that residual risk remains in the event of blockages of bridges and a failure of the wall, but they can be significantly reduced by maintenance actions and raising finished floor levels. And that the flood depths during those residual events are less than 600 mil, which is in keeping with A1.15 of TAN 15. All sleeping accommodation, it will be at first floor or at ground level with a finished floor level sufficiently above the flood levels in those residual events. As important to mention, the modelling does consider impact on flood risk elsewhere.
Thank you. That's the 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
And at a time, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, I'll now hand over to the planning officer to update members in conjunction with the addendum. I think it's Mr. Kerry Thomas, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I would like to refer you firstly to the addendum. There is a further representation from NRW in the addendum, which refers to the hydraulic modelling report. It's quite a detailed technical representation, so I'll leave it for you to read at your own leisure. I just would like to show you some slides showing the extent that would be subject to flood risk. So I'll ask Julia to go to slide 42, please, in the presentation, if she can share the screen. So what you have in front of you is what you have is a plan showing the flood risk during a 1% annual event probability event, and that includes 75% climate change. So it's 75% increase of climate change. Now, what you see in front of you, I'm not sure how clearly you can read the key to the colors, so I'll go through them. But the light blue coloration refers to a flood depth of between 0 and 0.3 meters, in other words, about 1 foot high. The mid blue section refers to flood depths of between 0.3 and 0.6 of a meter. The darker blue section refers to flood depths of between 0.6 and 1.2 of a meter. The purple section, that's basically along the course of the river, but includes areas upstream as well. That's between 1.2 and 2.4 of a meter. And the pink area is the part of the stream that's upstream of the bridge, and that's in excess of 2.4 meters. Could you go to the next slide, please, Julia? So this shows the, this is a similar diagram. This is for a 1% annual event probability, plus in this case, it's a 30% increase due to climate change. And that's the figure that NRW have referred to in their response. And that shows the consequence in such a flood event of an upstream bridge blockage. And as you can see, some of the units would still be at risk of flooding to depths of between 0 and 0.3 and up to 0.6 to 1.2 in that scenario. I'll ask Julia to go into the next slide, please. This shows a similar situation, but in this case, involving a blockage downstream of the bridge. Now, all the three slides we've seen are based on existing ground levels, so they don't include they don't take account of the mitigation measures, which Mr. Williams referred to in his presentation earlier on. And just to remind you, those mitigation measures would include constructing a flood wall along the right boundary of the stream. They would involve a slight increase in ground levels where the southeast access is required. And they would also include carrying out works to the bridge. Now, the works within the site could be secured by condition. However, the works to the bridge, they are outside the area of the planning application. They are not matters which can be essentially conditioned as part of this permission. They would require a separate permission from the council, and they would also need to be subject to the agreement of the highway authority. So there is some doubt as to whether the mitigation measures that are proposed in the flood consequences assessment can be achieved in their entirety. But assuming that the mitigation measures could be achieved, we'll now go on to the next slide, please. So this shows a mitigation scenario in a 1% annual event plus 30% climate change. As you can see, the level of flood risk would be significantly reduced. However, there would still be areas of the site that would be subject to flooding. If you could go to the next slide, please. This shows the similar situation, but with a blockage downstream of the bridge, again with the mitigation measures in place. In this case, there would be a lesser extent of flood risk. And the third slide, I'll just ask Julia to go to the next slide, please. So this shows the effect of a breach in the flood wall. And again, this is for a 1% annual event probability with 30% climate change allowance, and it's with the mitigation scenario. And as you can see, in the case of a breach of the flood wall, there would be a significant degree of flood risk. If we now go to the final slide, it's the next one in the sequence. And this shows a comparison between essentially before and after, without the mitigation measures and with the mitigation measures in place. The areas shaded green show a reduction in flood depths. The areas shown shaded, it's like a mauve color, would show an increase in flood depths. What's critical in this diagram is that it shows that the area, if you can see the bridge, which is just south of the red line boundary, that would experience greater flood depth with the mitigation measures in place. Because what the mitigation measures propose are replacing the parapets on the bridge with railings, and railings are intended to allow, essentially, it prevents the damming effect of the bridge, but it would have a greater impact on the users of the bridge itself. So there are significant concerns as to whether the mitigation measures that are proposed in the flood consequences assessment are achievable in their entirety. We cannot recommend that the works of the bridge are secured by a Grampian condition, because the policy test for a Grampian condition is that we must be satisfied that there is at least a reasonable prospect that the works will be carried out before the rest of the planning permission can be implemented. And we're not in a position where we have that degree of confidence. But even if the mitigation measures could be carried out, we are still in a situation where the site is contrary to TAN 15. TAN 15 does not allow any highly vulnerable development in the C2 flood zone. And even if it was not C2 flood zone, it wouldn't comply with the requirements of the TAN in terms of the site remaining flood-free in a 1 in 100 year event. So it is with reluctance that we're recommending refusal. It is a pity because the buildings are certainly clearly worthy of retention and being put to a constructive use. But we cannot, we feel we cannot support the application in its present form because there doesn't seem to be an immediately achievable solution to the flood risk situation. So it's with reluctance that we're recommending refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Okay, members, I've got Councillor Ivor Lloyd. Councillor Ivor? Can you just unmute?
Thank you, Chair.
There we go.
Can you hear me? Yep. This is a gem of a site, granted, and it's a lovely old building. But as if you're going to buy a house, what do they say? Location, location, location. If you're into water features, this would be ideal because you'd be in one for most of a better use of a word. I was there on the 9th of February last year in 3-4 foot of water, trying to help Mr. and Mrs. Williams, who live just the other side of this farm. When this farm was sold, the house was sold separate to the buildings, and they've been trying to develop it. I think it was given consent prior to TAN 15 being implemented in 2012 for 6. Now that would have been probably developed, but they would have been flooded by now. This site will always flood. It's unless we're going to redirect the river, and I can't see anyone doing that soon. What mitigation they've put in place on the hydraulic modelling would work temporarily, but it will always flood. And what hasn't been considered in these hydraulic assessments is also the water that comes off the mountain called Moelymben down the Barog direction as well. The Barog being the catchment area that comes down, but more or less behind Colomendy Peter Davison's property. So we have that problem with water always going to flood it. We also have 11 properties, which factors in 22 potential cars. Now, if we're looking to encourage active travel, this is about as far away as you can get from the public transport. So it's not just one major factor that's stopping this. There's quite a few, but I'll leave it to members, but I would propose that we go with the recommendation for the officers and refuse this application.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely beautiful building. Absolutely beautiful building. It was a shame to see it in such a condition yesterday when we went. And I hope that in the future it can be used for something. I mean, because it would be a shame to lose it. But the bridge upstream, I noticed, is 3 small arches, and it would be very easy to block that actually. I mean, I defer to the local councillor, who obviously knows the area better than probably has read any of us. And I'll second his proposal, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ken. Cynghorydd Tristan.
Pnawn da, na I droi'n fideo ffwr achos dydy'r cysylltiad ddim yn dda o gwbl. Di ddim yn dda yn Llanfairpwll Hear yma heddiw o ran cysylltiad. Ia, mynd i gynnig o'n i eilio cynghorydd Ifor Lloyd Fishina pnawn ddoe, y rhwystyr mawr fydd yr afon, ac yn amlwg mae'r holl amodau dyn ni wedi glywed yn atal yr cynllun yma. Bod yr adeiladau mor hardd, a gyda'i gwir, mae'n biti garw gweld nhw'n dirywio gymaint achos maen nhw o radd cofrestredig, mae'n biti gweld nhw y toiau'n dechrau mynd ag ati, ond fedrwn ni hyd y gwela i ddim cefnogi wedyn eisiau eilio hynny o'n ni. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd.
Okay, diolch yn fawr. I haven't got any more speakers down on my screen. Councillor Peter Lewis. Councillor Peter?
Well, could I ask clarification from the officer? I think mention was mention of the existing planning permission for 6 dwellings. Is that still live?
Mr. Thomas?
No, the permission which was granted in 2012 has now lapsed.
Okay. Well, I accept the situation in terms of flooding. My real concern is that what mitigation measures could possibly be put in place for this particular building, because I think by any stretch of the imagination, they've certainly got no future agricultural use. And I think it'll only be a matter of time before they become totally beyond repair, unless you've got a very deep pocket. And I suspect the reason for the increase in the number of proposed dwellings is a reflection of that cost in actually developing the site. So perhaps the officer could enlighten me as to whether or not they perceive there are mitigation measures that potentially could be put in place to deal with the flooding scenario.
That's not a very easy question to answer, because the site, or at least part of the site, is in the C2 floodplain, and TAN 15 is quite clear that highly vulnerable development should not be allowed in any circumstances in the floodplain. We have asked NRW to review the flood consequences assessment because we realise that the need to protect listed buildings or find new uses to listed buildings is a counter argument, and to see whether there is some form of way forward. Unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be any reasonable way forward. Some of the mitigation measures that are proposed could be secured by condition, but I think the most significant one is the works that are being proposed to the bridge. And the works that are proposed to the bridge would need be subject to further consents both from the planning and highway authorities. And as the screen we just showed shows, there would be a risk that users of the bridge would experience higher flood depths than they do presently. Unfortunately, there isn't an easy answer to this. It is possible that the buildings on the west side of the stream could be put to a productive use because they are in the Class B flood zone, which is at a lower risk of flooding. But the most significant buildings from an architectural point of view are the ones on the the east side of the stream, and that side of the stream is entirely within the C2 flood zone. So unfortunately, I'm not able to bring you any glimmer of hope, I'm afraid.
My concern is that, you know, a few years down the road, these buildings will have become dilapidated, and by rights, the council then should request that they're maintained. And I think it's unfair on the applicant that they could be faced with that going forward when we're talking about a 1% flooding risk, according to the officer this afternoon. And I just question whether or not I suspect our risk each day to each one of us is more than 1%. And I really concerned that it was apparent yesterday, you know, that the quality of the buildings deserve to be preserved. And I personally would like to see this development to proceed. So on that basis, then I'm going to actually propose that the mitigation measures that have been put in place should be adequate to meet that 1%. And therefore, I'm going to propose that we approve the applicant's application.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. I have got the list of members, but I've also got an indication from our legal officer. So if you won't mind, members, I'll bring in Lisa, the legal officer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry to interrupt. There's just, well, there's two matters now that I just wanted to address. The first one is, can I just kindly remind the public speakers that they are only allotted the 3 minutes in order to address the committee. I'm aware that Mr. Davison, you have written some comments on the chat facility, and I think you may have put your hand up as well, but unfortunately, in accordance with protocol, we would not be able to accept any further points from you on this particular application. So just so that you're aware there that your comments can't be regarded by the taken into account by the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah,
Mr. Thomas, I know. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. The second matter was just obviously just to remind you, Chair, regarding the position with the proposals. So you have a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation, which has been seconded, and Councillor Lewis has just made a proposal to approve the application. Again, in accordance with the protocol, we can't have two proposals on the table at the same time. So what would happen was we'd have to take the first proposal to the vote first. Of course, any members that wish to vote against that proposal may do so. If that proposal falls, then we bring it back to members, and Councillor Lewis would then have the opportunity to make his proposal again.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, what the legal officer is saying is that the initial proposal, which was proposed and seconded, we will vote on that after the deliberations. If that carries, then it carries. If it falls, then the other proposal will then be put forward to the members. Okay, members. Mr. Thomas, I know you've got your indicated to speak. I don't know if it's in relation to what Councillor Peter has raised, or do you want me to continue with the other members?
No, I just wanted to raise a point of clarification regarding the 1% annual event probability. The reason why the flood consequences assessment models the site in relation to 1% annual event probability is because that is the frequency event that TAN 15 says that flood risk should be assessed. It doesn't mean to say that flooding cannot occur more frequently than that, It just means that that is basically the modelling frequency that is prescribed in TAN 15. But we shouldn't necessarily conclude that the site will not flood on a more frequent basis. It's simply the way that the data is presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. I've got now Councillor Austin. Cynghorydd Austin Roberts. Austin.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. A gael gyntaf ymddehiro, dwi'n cael problemau mawr efo'r cysylltwedd heddiw. Am gyfnod wedi colli rhywfaint o drafodaeth oherwydd oedd yr sain ddim yn gweithio. Beth bynnag, yr hyn hoffwn i ddweud ydy, dwi am fynd efo'r swyddogion yn hyn o beth a mynd efo'r argymhelliad. A tra bod fi'n cyd yn deimlo'n fawr iawn efo cynghorydd Peter Lewis, mi oeddan nhw, mi fys i ar yr ymweliad safle yn y diwedd, ac mae'r adeiladau yn rhoi hardd ac o ddiddordeb architectural hier. Ac, ond wedi deud hynny, mae rhaid ni fynd efo wybodaeth leol, a mae cynghorydd i farwolaeth wedi gwneud pwyntiau reit cry, dwi'n meddwl. Ydy, y broblem sydd ydy, efallai bod na mond risg o 1%, ond tydan ni ddim yn gwybod be fydd y dyfodol yn dangos i ni, oherwydd mae yna ffasiwn beth a newid hinsawdd. Ac y broblem sydd gen i ydy, mwy na thebyg y pobl fydd yn prynu yr anedda yma os fydden nhw yn cael i adeiladu. Fydd pobl allan i'r ardal, ac fydd hynny'n dod yma ac yn gweld o yn safle deuniadol dros ben, a heb cymryd i ystyriaeth bod, bod y dŵr ar afon yn edrych yn neis iawn yn yr ha, yn y gaea, mae o yn creu problemau. Felly oherwydd hynny, dwi am fynd efo'r argymhelliad. Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Kerry, I know you've still got your hand up, Kerry. I don't know if you want me to continue with the members. You're on mute. Yeah. Okay. If I move on, I've got Councillor Evo next. Councillor Evo?
Yeah, what I have learned, so I don't mean to speak twice, but what I have learned with being on the planning committee is not to be emotive. It's a beautiful building, but I wouldn't like to put a young family in somewhere where they'll be in danger. And seeing the power of that water last year on 2 occasions is scary. Now, there are other considerations we can look at, not in this application, obviously, but dressed up in different clothes, it could easily be converted and preserved as a B2, basically, a light industrial, where you could have local light industry in there, crafts. It basically lends itself to that kind of building. It used to house shire horses and horses and carts. That's that. You saw it yesterday on the site visit. The yard is wonderful, and it could be wonderful again, but not as houses. I don't think it's not fit for purpose, and this is our job here today. We are here to clarify that it is not fit for purpose, but it could be considered for another use in another application. Diolch.
Yeah, Councillor. Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've listened quite closely to what's been said, and to be honest, I'm sort of leaning to supporting Councillor Peter Lewis. You know, we ought to be preserving these buildings if we can, but I'm also mindful of the fact that we're well behind on the number of properties that we're building within our county, specifically in the rural areas. And, you know, who are we? I don't think we are the ones that should be saying you shouldn't be building here because it's not safe. I think that's for NRW to be saying that. And what we should be saying is, we think as lay people that the risk is acceptable following the mitigation done by the applicant. And if NRW are unhappy with that and they feel there's a risk to life and to young children, then it's up to them to pull the stops and call the planning approval in, which they do on a regular basis, I believe, because that is their purpose, not our purpose. The other thing is, Councillor Austin mentioned about people from outside the area buying properties. Well, if that stops somebody buying a property in Egglesbach, then all the better, as far as I'm concerned. You know, we have a myriad of rivers in this country, not just in Wales, but in the whole of the United Kingdom. Properties along their shoreline who regularly flood, and yet people like to buy those properties. And I don't think it is for us to say you shouldn't be doing it. I think the risk is acceptable, and anybody who would buy those properties, knowing the risk, would do it with open eyes. So I'm happy to support Councillor Peter Lewis. Let's build some properties, and that'll ease up the property shortage within our county. And I'm all for that, as you know, Councillor Trevor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Capper. Councillor Phil.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was on the site visit yesterday, and it is indeed a beautiful building, and I would wish to see it used. However, regretfully, I'm going to have to go with the officer's recommendation on it. But if an application were to come in the future for sort of a reverse living where the upper floors were accommodation, that was something I could view more favourably. So I'm with Ivor on this one, in that it does have other uses, which may include accommodation on the upper floors, which could perhaps resolve the issue of flooding by some meters. So that's all I've got to say on the issue. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. Cynghorydd Austin Roberts. Austin?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. I ddod yn ôl at yr hyn mae y Cynghorydd Smith wedi dweud. A mi na ddeud hyn yn Saesneg ac ofn i ni cael lost in translation lle. Cos dwi'n meddwl bod wedi camgymeryd yr hyn o'n i'n trio i ddweud. There's a property in Egglesbach which got flooded severely by a similar stream to this. And in fact, the stream was slightly further away than what this particular stream is from these buildings. Those people were totally devastated. They were people who came from Yorkshire who are used to rain. And I explained to them, there's two things you need to know about Wales. There's lots of sheep and there's lots of rain. And that's the point I was trying to make. Local knowledge is always useful. We should listen to those who have got local knowledge. Councillor Iwan Lloyd has got that knowledge. He's already explained to us that stream, that tiny stream, can be a torrent. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I think it would be really silly if we approved this, if we went against officers' recommendation. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief because Councillor Phil has really covered what I was going to say. We were standing together looking at that stream with quite a bit of horror, actually. You didn't need to be the local member or somebody that lived in that area, had experienced flooding before, to see the dangers and how low the building was in that little valley there. So yes, I will be voting against approval. It needs the officer's recommendation is the way forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Okay, members, I haven't got any more members down to speak, and with the protocol, we will go with the proposition, the initial proposition, which was proposed and seconded, which was to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. So that's what you're voting on. You're either voting for the officer's recommendation to refuse or otherwise. Okay, members, so if I could ask Jane to ask the members how they're voting, whether it's for, against, or they are refraining to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Stott. Councillor Phil Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
Against.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
O blaid.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Blaid.
Councillor Dave Rees.
O.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
In Arfen.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you. That's 10 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention.
So, and I'll just refer to the legal officer now. That, according to the voting, that application has been refused. So therefore, am I right in saying that the second proposal would not be put forward?
Yes, that's
Lisa,
correct. Yeah, yes, the application has been refused, Chair. So that's the end of the discussion.
Okay. Thank you for that advice. Okay, members, so that's been refused. So we move on to the next application. It is the same site. It's code reference 0/46946. The restoration of 3 listed stone barns and conversion as 11 dwellings, demolition of 2 modern steel extensions, demolition of steel barn and replacement with garages and stores, re-landscaping of the site, and this is listed building consent at Melai Barns, Bedouin Road, Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwyrndrobwllllantysiliogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogogo to speak again unless they say otherwise. So I'll now invite Mr. Peter Davison, who is speaking against the application. This is on the listed building consent. Mr. Davison, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining.
We are concerned, can you hear me? We're concerned about the impact of the mitigation plan on the downstream bridge from the property, which is also listed, so impacted by listed building consent. The flood modelling shows that it would be scoured by high velocity waters, and that would potentially undermine the footings of that bridge. That would be a concern for us. Likewise, the alterations to the properties that were proposed, we would request that they are in keeping both front and back with the character of the building, and that any skylights that are would be insisted in any future application would be opaque glass, or what you call it, frosted glass, so that they don't overlook properties above the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davison. Thank you. Okay, so I will invite again Mr. Aled Williams, who was speaking in favour. Okay, Mr. Williams.
Nothing too much.
3 minutes as well. Yeah.
Nothing too much to add from my comments before. I'll just finish off on my last point because it's very similar. Just worth pointing out about mitigation, and we saw the map with the green areas on. In that 1% with 30% climate change event, there's a residential property directly downstream of the site called Nantmelai. Currently, that floods about to 0.4 meters in that 1% plus climate change event. With the mitigation we're proposing, it completely removes the risk to that building. And you'll also note that the agricultural bounds to the south of the site, which shown as green, meaning the mitigation proposals actually make things better for that barn. It's obviously, there is an increased risk to the road, but there is much betterment to an existing property and the existing agricultural buildings off-site. Yeah, that's why I didn't get to say last time. Otherwise, yeah, that's me done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, I'll bring Mr. Kerry Thomas in again. Mr. Thomas, have you any further comments to make?
Nothing further. I'd just like to advise members that in dealing with an application for listed building consents, the only considerations we have are the effect of the proposal, of the effect of the works on the historic and architectural interest of the building, and biodiversity is also a material consideration. There's no objection in principle to the principle of converting and restoring the building. However, we are concerned about the scope of the heritage impact assessment, that it does not fully assess the extent of the works that have been proposed. And it is only for that reason that we are recommending that the application for a listed building consent be refused. If they were to come back with a new application with the process of explaining how they have proposed the design solution in order to make best use of the historic features of the building, then we may well come to a different conclusion. So if you go along with the officer's recommendation and refuse listed building consent, that doesn't mean that's the end of the matter. It just means that they will need to submit a further application, this time more fully justified, and hopefully it could be one that we would be able to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask, is Kerry actually saying that the proposals don't go far enough? I mean, when we were there yesterday, the removal of the steel barns and that would have made the building, would have made it a better setting, let's put it that way. But is that what Kerry's saying, is that the proposals don't go far enough? I'd like to ask him. Kerry?
Okay, the steel barns aren't listed, so they wouldn't need listed building consent to remove them. I think it's more to do with the process, because listed building consent is a statutory process which has to be effectively, it's subject to ultimately the potential scrutiny by CADU, who can call in an application if they feel that the works have not been fully adequately explained and justified. And it's really a case of making sure that the justification is fully explained. It is something that it is an issue which could be easily resolved, but unfortunately we haven't been able to get to that situation in this application. So reluctantly, again, we are recommending refusal. But this time I think there is a prospect that a further application could be supported as long as it was set out in the proper way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
I was, this is pure, but if somebody into a sort of, as if it a semi-industrial use like a brewery or something that didn't affect the outside appearance, we would be far more likely to be in favour of this, wouldn't we?
Thank you for that, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Ivor. Cynghorydd Ivor.
Diolch yn fawr. Ie, dwi'n hapus iawn I cefnogi'r argymelliad yma. Ie, mae yna mwy o waith, must try hard, fel ma'n dweud. Ie, mae yna fwy o waith I wneud ar y safle yma, ond ie, beth cynghorydd Hinchcliffe yn dweud o'na, mae yna potensial yn y safle, ond ddim I pobl fyw yna, dwi'n meddwl. Diolch.
Diolch fawr, thank you. I haven't got any other members down to speak, and as I recollect, we haven't had a firm proposal or seconder one way or the other. So is anybody prepared to make a proposal and a second?
I think if
the officer's recommendation is to refuse.
I just recommended that. I recommended that then, Councillor Trevor.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll second that, Councillor Trevor.
I'll second it.
Thanks. Yeah. I've got Cynghorydd Austin Roberts. Austin?
Yeah, mae'n ddrwg gen I, Mr Cadeirydd, a dwi wedi tynnu fy llaw I lawr. Dim ond mynd I eilio yr hyn oedd Cynghorydd Ifor Lloyd yn ei gynnig. Na cwbl. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you. So we've had a proposer and a seconder, which is to refuse the application. Can members indicate now, if Jane asks, can you just let her know whether you're for the recommendation, which is to refuse the application, or otherwise? Can you say whether you're for, against, or whether you're abstaining? Jane?
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
4.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Oh, you're on mute, Andrew.
I wasn't. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Hunter.
4.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
Abstain.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
O blaid.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Blaid.
Councillor Dave Rees.
4.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
4.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. That's 10 in favour and 3 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, so that application is refused. So we move on to the next application, which is code reference 0/48039. The proposed works include altering part of the boundary fence to enable access onto the property at the rear of the property garden and the erection of a driveway with parking space for 1 car enclosed in the current garden. The current fencing would be replaced with a gate to match the current boundary fence, which would then allow access to the property at Llywelyn, Pantarawon, Penmaen Mawr. And we do have speakers for this, members, so I will first invite Mr. Timothy Pritchard to speak, who is speaking against the application. Mr. Pritchard, welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes to address the committee and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining. Do we have it? Is Mr. Pritchard available?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
yes,
there
we
are.
can.
There we are.
Pantarawon Close includes a metre-wide council-maintained footpath and a private driveway maintained by the owners. Llywelyn's request for vehicle access to the close was refused from the outset. Planning Permission cannot override the legal rights of Pantarawon Close, but I'm not confident the applicant understands or will recognise this point. Regardless, a driveway should have been included in the application, being redlined on the site plan to the public highway. From dimensions of the applicant's site plan, the proposed new fence and gate would lie on Pantarawon Close and would require not only the removal of the original joint boundary situated west of a fence erected without permission, but also steps which were part of the former chapel. The steps support both the Garden of Ardmacaca and its northern retaining wall. Certificate B, not A, should have been completed. This is a point of law that will be pursued should permission be granted. This encroachment can be seen by comparing the record site plan to relevant title plans on file. The residents have a legal right to the peaceful enjoyment of their property. Conwy Council should not support trespass, annexation of land, damage, nuisance, increased traffic and noise on private property. Llywelyn did not enjoy private parking facilities when purchased by the applicant. Should the residents of Pantarawon Close suffer a significant loss of amenity so the applicant can increase theirs, is it Conwy Council's policy to alleviate street parking by allowing properties to use their neighbour's land without consent? This would result in anarchy. Yet such a proposal is what you are being asked to review today. A condition of the planning permission for the close was that on highway safety grounds, a turning space within the curtilage was required, so cars entered and left in a forward gear. Due to the driveway's narrowness and steep gradient, an entrance to the west of the close will be dangerous to access and egress, whilst also suffering obstructed vision due to its proximity to Ardmacaca's garden. This is a major concern for the residents and users of the public footpath. Of further concern is the failure to consider the busy junction of the close's entrance. Vehicles entering the close will be forced to wait on the junction and block vehicles entering or exiting Conwy Old Road, whilst cars egress from Llywelyn and the subsequent closing of gates. The application requests the removal of another healthy tree from Llywelyn. The applicant has submitted 2 previous applications for the removal of healthy trees. Replacing a mature tree with a small ornate variety to the applicant's taste would be a travesty. The planning report recommends that the application be determined under delegation due to timing. Planning rejected my request for the application to be considered at the May meeting. Such delegation would undermine the significant efforts of the owners to have this application decided by the planning committee. I am not the individual within planning responsible for the preliminary report which failed to address major issue. Diolch yn fawr am wrando. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. I'll now invite Mrs. Rebecca Ward speaking in favour of the application, who is the applicant. Mrs. Ward, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining.
Sorry, Councillor Stott. The applicant's had to leave the meeting, so she's requested that you will read her notes out. Is that possible, or would you prefer myself to do it? I've got the notes here.
Yeah, I've got notes to hand, so if you
No.
wouldn't mind, Jane, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. It's short notice. She had to dash off, so if you've got no objection,
No.
I'll read them out to the committee. Just give me a moment.
3 minutes, Jane.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to time myself and read the notes. I'm multitasking.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. The reason for our application is that the issue of parking is a frequent and reoccurring problem for those who live in Penman Mawr. There is extremely limited off-road parking in the area for which this application has been submitted, and this issue has worsened in recent years due to substantial amount of new development in the area. The reason that we're requiring to submit the application is to apply to erect the gate and alter the boundary fencing as the application site falls within a conservation area. The construction of the vehicular access and the driveway is considered permitted development. I would like to reiterate the right-of-way and access issues are not matters that are dealt with or should be considered by planning. We're in the process of clarifying the right-of-way over this land and the right of access as a separate issue. The main reason for the objections in relation to this planning application are matters relating to the right-of-way and access, which are being dealt with. Firstly, I would like to comment on the highway safety of the proposed development. As can be seen from the images submitted, the road is clearly designed to be used for pedestrians and vehicles, and is also used by delivery and recycling trucks. One car using the road would not cause a significant increase in the threat posed to pedestrians using the road, and there is ample space to manoeuvre vehicles. There are a number of similar existing roads like this, which are close in vicinity to this proposal and share pedestrian and vehicle access, including ones that adjoin the road in a similar way to this proposal. This is characteristic of Penman Mawr due to the nature of the properties in the area, with a mixture of older and newer properties. The additional traffic caused by one single car using it on occasion would not significantly impact the safety of pedestrians. The fence and gate's height would be reduced to aid visibility between pedestrians and vehicles, and as you have seen, the highways officer is satisfied that the proposed works will not cause an increased risk to pedestrians. In contrast, we have often observed many vehicles parking in inconvenient and often illegal locations, such as on corners of roads or junctions. As a result, any justifiable and sensible means of increasing parking in the area would help improve highway safety elsewhere in the village. This would benefit not only the residents, but those who frequently visit the area. That's my 3 minutes up, members. I've not quite finished, but thank you. You're on mute, Councillor Stott.
Sorry about that. I had to mute because unfortunately there was a doorbell going somewhere. I do apologise to members and to officers. So that's the speakers. I will now hand over to the planning officer, and I think that is Mr. Dave Watson. Dave?
Yep, hello. Thank you, Chairman. Just to tell you what's in the addendum, there were 11 representations mentioned in the main committee report, including 8 objections, and we've had 2 further objections received. Most of those points that are raised are points that are the same as the points in the main addendum, main report. There are some additional points, which I'll just mention to you. One of them is the concern that the applicant hasn't completed the ownership certificate A. So they've completed the ownership certificate A and not B. They also say that Pendragon Close is a driveway and not a private road. They say that the applicant should have included the private drive within the application site to the public highway. Unauthorised vehicle access from the private driveway would be trespass. There's no existing problem of parking congestion in Penmaen Mawr, which is well served with on-street parking and public car parks. And they refer to the stress and impact and unfairness on existing elderly residents, including the potential cost of taking legal action. Just as a reminder to members, the application consultation period has been extended because we have displayed a site notice until which runs now until the 15th of April, which is tomorrow. So we may get some further representations submitted actually after this planning committee meeting. So we're seeking delegated authority from committee to consider those representations and then determine the application under delegation. I think it's worth my while showing you some of the slides, if that's okay, Julia. So the existing slide, the first slide there is one you can't see very clearly. Can you zoom in at all on the? No, it's the land registry plan provided by the applicant. And then the next slide, please. So that's existing site plan, layout plan without the access. It shows trees 1, 2, and 3 alongside what is the eastern boundary of the site, but it's actually the bottom of the drawing that's shown there. The next slide, please. This is the proposed site layout, which shows with the driveway, parking area, and the new access. And T3 would be the tree. T3 is the tree that would be removed. It's a sycamore tree. Just to remind members that the tree officer doesn't object to that tree removal. Next slide, please. This is showing that there's an existing fence alongside the driveway, and that would be reduced in height to 900 millimeters, so lowered in height for visibility reasons as requested by the highway officer. We will now run through the photographs. If you can go through them. So I'll talk you through the first few. So looking up from the highway, this is showing the private driveway, and it shows the public footpath, which is on the left-hand side, separated or delineated by the white line. And on the right-hand side of the picture, where you've got a pollarded tree, then beyond that's a stone wall that borders onto the driveway, and then beyond that is the fence. That's the fence which is at issue as whether it's within the application site or not. And then up at the top of that fence, the top end of that fence is where the access would be. And the sycamore tree that would be removed is the one that's covered in ivy type vegetation. If you carry on through the slides, please. So a closer view, keep going, please. Keep going, that's okay. Okay, keep going, thank you. We stop on that slide. So the fence at issue is a dispute is whether or not the fence is within the control of the applicant or not. It's not something that the officers feel that we can adjudicate over, because we do have, the applicant has submitted a land registry plan, the objectives have submitted a land registry plan, which are basically ordnance survey type plans with red lines on them. And you can't from those easily decide whether or not something, exactly where that boundary lies, to determine whether something is within one property's ownership or the other. The fence there was constructed by the previous owner, not the applicant, and it does look as though it's been erected slightly to the east of the property, slightly nearer to the driveway. But having said that, because we can't determine where that boundary line is lawfully, we still don't know whether or not it's within the applicant's ownership or whether it encroaches into onto the ownership of the private driveway. So we can't adjudicate about this, and it isn't really a planning consideration for that reason. Keep going to the next slide, please. And keep going. And there we have it. That's all of the slides. And sorry, there are some more, which are the land ownership ones provided by the objector. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the objectors have referred to the committee plan as being inaccurate. It doesn't show very clearly in that drawing. You go to the next slide, please. And this is a land ownership plan from the adjoining property owner. And then the next slide, please, is another land ownership, another land registry plan that's submitted by the adjoining owner. So, as I say, we're not able to adjudicate exactly where the ownership and where the boundary line lies. It isn't a planning consideration. It's something which is a private matter between those parties. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. Okay, I've got Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken.
Sure. Yeah, Pendragon Close it's a little access lane basically for the three houses at the top. It's not really wide enough for two cars to pass. Certainly not with the public footpath there. I was interested in what was said about the car parking problems. Most of the problems with cars parking on that at the other end of town, up by Spa, that's where the problems seem to occur. This application seems to raise more questions actually than answers. Certainly we seem to be saying basically, okay, you can build this in your back garden, but how you get to it is up to you kind of thing, you know, it's your problem kind of thing. That's what we seem to be saying now. I would rather think that the development building control manager will be the best person to talk about this, because there's still issues outstanding, aren't there? There are still issues to be dealt with. So I don't think we can determine it here today, actually. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Capper. Councillor Phil.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask Mr. Watson to confirm that land ownership is not a planning consideration, or is?
I can certainly comment for you. You know, land ownership can be a planning consideration, and we have a situation, without going into too much details, with the Pier Pavilion site, where part of the mitigation that's required for the scheme is on land, and whether or not that's under the control of the application, of the applicant or a third party, is one of the considerations, because in that case, the mitigation, if it can't be delivered, it means that the scheme is not acceptable. So it can be an important consideration if there's something that hinges upon it. You might say that's a requirement of making a scheme acceptable. In this case, there isn't anything that hinges on the land that's at issue. It's purely an ownership right or a right of access. It doesn't change the planning merits of the scheme. There's no works that are proposed on that private driveway or on the visibility. that are matters that we need to be concerned about from a planning point of view. So it doesn't have the same implications. So in this case, the land ownership issue isn't anything more than just a private matter between the parties concerned. It doesn't have any bearing on the planning merits. Part of the point that's been raised by the objectors is that the applicant has put in the wrong certificate, and they've only certified that they own the land, and they haven't certified that anyone else owns the land. And that is a validation requirement to put in the right certificate. But because we can't adjudicate over who owns the land, we can't adjudicate over that point either. And it really doesn't make any, again, because it doesn't affect the planning merits at all, it isn't something that we need to be concerned about. The third parties have their own ownership controls over that land, which they can enforce. And in terms of notification to adjoining owners, the adjoining owners are aware of this application because they have become aware of it, but also we've carried out publicity, including the site notice. So there's no notification deficiency, you might say, nothing to stop the application from being determined. So has that answered your question, Councillor?
Well, yes, sort of. A sub-question to it though. So if we were to grant planning permission, that doesn't necessarily grant the person that we have granted the planning permission to build on if it turns out to be somebody else's land.
It doesn't grant, no, the planning permission is only under the Planning Acts, and it isn't the same as giving land ownership approval for something. And likewise, the right of access as well. It's not, we don't grant a right of access. If the applicant doesn't have a right of access, they would have to acquire that from whoever can give them the right of access. It's not something that we grant under planning. So they might have a land ownership obstacle to overcome, and they might have a right of access obstacle to overcome. But both of those are things which we don't have any jurisdiction over.
Thank you. That was my understanding. Thank you for your clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to Mr. Watson for showing us those, and Julia for showing us those photographs, because they're very illuminating. I mean, I'm used to Craigadon and Junction, where there are much narrower sort of side streets, alleyways that people use for access, and indeed for putting their cars at the back of their properties or in garages at the back of their residential houses. It's much tighter than that close in Penmaenmawr. It's even got a footpath delineation, which I was quite impressed with. I don't think we can get involved in this dispute. It's unfortunate that we've landed right in the centre of it. But given what Mr. Watson has said and about previous planning applications where people have expected the planning committee to adjudicate on land ownership, and we just can't do that. That's not our remit. I think on balance, I would like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation, obviously subject to consideration of any outstanding public consultation responses, just in case something completely new comes out of that consultation process. But I think we've got in front of us the objections, and we've heard the objections today by the speaker. So I think we can fairly make a decision, and I think I would like to go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
I'd like to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. Thank you, Councillor Phil and Councillor Chris. I've got Councillor Peter Lewis. Councillor Peter.
Well, thank you, Chair. People obviously don't follow the rules here in terms of the raised hand. So I was going to second it too, because I think we should only consider it on planning grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel.
I was only going to second the proposal, that's all. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, members, I haven't got any more members down to speak. It's been proposed. Am I right in assuming somebody seconded that?
Yes, Chair. Councillor
Thank you.
Phil Capper seconded it.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah. Thank you. Okay, members, we've had a proposal and a seconder, which is to go with the officer's
Can I ask a
recommendation.
question,
Obviously,
Chair?
sorry, Councillor Ken.
I just wanted to ask a question, Chair. What exactly are we voting for? Are we voting voting for minding conditional planning permission, or are we going for option B, which is the development building control manager decides is authorised to determine the application?
All right. Yeah. What happens, Councillor Ken, is most of the applications we deal with, even when we approve them, is always subject to the building control manager carrying out, but basically it goes with what we say. I was just going to add that the officer has reminded us that the closing date is tomorrow, so it could well be that something would come in that would be significant, but otherwise you're voting now. The proposer and seconder is to approve the application, subject to, as I see on this, subject to consideration of outstanding public consultation process.
Because that's what was worrying me, Chair, because there's still issues that are outstanding. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay, members. So if you would like to indicate to Jane whether you're for the proposal, which has been seconded, which is to approve the application subject to the final process, or otherwise. So if you could indicate whether you're for, against, or you're abstaining.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Apply.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Applied.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Applied.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
Abstain, Chair.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay. Thank you, members. That's 11 in favour and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, members. That is approved, subject obviously to the final consultation. We move on to the next application, which is code reference 0/48048. It's the demolition of existing 2-storey garage and the erection of a purpose-built 2-storey centre at the Sure Hope Christian Centre, 317 Abergele Road, Old Colwyn. We do have speakers, but we do have Mr. Joe Marshall, who unfortunately is not able to attend, and I have got a short letter to read out to, and we also have a Mr. Peter Carcraft, who is the applicant. So perhaps if I could read out what Mr. Marshall has said. He has said, I am unsure if I need to raise an objection again, as the plans have been resubmitted. The reason for my objection is that simply not enough car parking space for the proposed project. The car park on Albert Road can only park around 10 cars due to the shape and the entrance. When there has been functions taken place, most people do not use the car park and park on Albert Road. Also, the amount of noise during the summer can really spoil the use of my garden that backs onto the church. I do appreciate what the church is doing, but it is not the property to do this. Regards, Joe Marshall. Okay, so now I will invite Mr. Peter Carcraft to address the committee. Mr. Carcraft, you do have 3 minutes to address the committee, and we will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining in your own time. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Councillor Stott, the other councillors, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to address the committee this afternoon. My name is Peter Calcraft. I'm a resident of Old Colwyn, and I'm the Chair of Trustees for Shore Hope Church. Now, Shore Hope Church is a long-established church in Old Colwyn, and it's a church that has demonstrated over recent years a great desire to work with and help both the local community and across the region. Indeed, Shore Hope Church was at the forefront of an innovative project involving a group of churches across both Colwyn Bay and Llandudno last winter. This was a project that was funded and coordinated by the Conwy Council, and at least a dozen long-standing homeless persons, both male and female, were sheltered for 10 weeks during the harsh winter conditions. Many of these have continued to benefit in receiving food from our food share program through to the present time. Now, the plans before you are in their third iteration, and we have sought at each instance to respond accordingly to the concerns brought before us by both the authorities and of the neighbours. We have sacrificed purposeful training resources, and we've drawn our final plans down to a minimum to still be able to perform the essential planned programs for the local community. You see, this building will become a community hub, housing a variety of programs to further upskill those with low skill levels and help many in the community to attain their full potential. I can confirm that parking will not be problematic at the church. A typical day's routine has previously been provided to the authority, and also I should mention that the local highways authority has expressed no objections to the scheme. At the heart of our plans is the growth of our food share program. It will be essential to be able to fully service this program with adequate storage facility and to provide an efficient space to display effectively the food that we glean constantly from many shops and supermarkets across North Wales. We've seen the food share program triple during the COVID pandemic. And I know this resource will be essential for many more as we go forward into a period of further food hardship.
30 seconds left.
We are at present providing food to an average of 120 households across 2 centres each week, and we're utilising all of the infrastructure of the core church building to host the programme. The church has given freely, financially and physically to meet the challenge of food hunger that has developed over the last 12 months. The existing church building is now straight to provide adequate function to the church congregation, and we have to perform difficult and arduous transitions each week as we constantly transform between offering community facilities and being a place of worship.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calcraft.
Okay,
I'll now hand over to the planning officer. I think it's Mr. Kerry Thomas, is it?
Yes, thank you. There is some update on representations. There have been further 7 objections received. These relate to the latest plans from local residents on Albert Road and Mysacoid Avenue, and they reinforce issues with overshadowing, inadequate parking and overlooking. The Highways Office has reviewed the additional information on deliveries and parking and reiterates no objection, but refers to their previous comments which requested a condition for a construction traffic management plan. The Public Protection Office also requests a construction method statement. They've also asked for a condition on restricting the hours for deliveries, and what they suggest is it's between 8 AM and 6 PM Mondays to Fridays. The applicants have advised us that whilst most of the activity will take place during the day, they do expect the need to carry out some collections during the evenings, and that's because they can only collect from some supermarkets outside peak hours. So what we are suggesting is the condition which would require the collections and deliveries to take place between 7 AM and 9 PM Mondays to Saturdays. Of course, it's up to members if they wish to come to a different condition. But that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I've got Councillor Ken Stevens.
Thanks, Chair. this used to be a plumber's. I'm sure it's either plumbers or an electrician wholesalers down there. There must have been a lot of traffic coming and going then. It's a shame that we need this kind of thing, this kind of business today, basically, isn't it? But yeah, I would move the officer's recommendation, Chair. Are they going to alter the times then to 7 and 9? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ken. Yeah. Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel.
Chair, I'd be happy to second Ken's proposal, but I'd like to see that taken from 7 to 8 a.m. in the morning till 9 p.m. at night. I think we've got to give people the opportunity to get a decent night's sleep, and waking up at 7 in the morning doesn't always fit in with people. So I think 8 a.m. would be a better time, personally, if Ken would be happy to put that alteration in.
I don't have a problem with that, Chair.
Okay, so just reiterate what you're proposing is it's 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. Is that correct, Councillor?
That's correct. 8 a.m. till 9 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel. We've now got Councillor Peter Lewis. Councillor Peter.
Well, comment I was going to make, Chair, is that I think the new roof line on the proposed development will in actual fact benefit the property on Abigail Road. I should think it'll improve the light, so I'm in favour of the application, Chair.
Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Peter. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I can't help thinking that the demand for food banks is going to increase as Brexit bites. Currently, we're not stopping imports, but that will surely finish shortly. So I think the demand for food banks will increase. Sorry about my phone. So I'm in favour.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Andrew. I haven't got any other members down to speak. We've had a proposer and a seconder, which is to, oh, sorry, just before I move on, I'll bring the legal officer in there, Lisa Jones. Lisa?
Yeah, just to confirm that all members are happy with the proposed amendment before you take it to the vote, Chair.
Could you repeat that, Lisa? The audio wasn't very good.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Lisa.
Yep, it's just to, could you just ask the members if they're all in favour of the proposed amendment before you take the vote, please, to the hours, delivery hours?
Yeah, I think I've got that right. Yeah, so what it is, members, is there's been a proposer and a seconder to approve the application with the amendments, which this is regarding the times of operation. So you would be voting for, if you like, an amendment to the application. I hope that's correct, Lisa, before I ask the members.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So just an indication by hands will be fine, Chair, for that. Yeah.
So, can members first indicate that they're happy with the amendment to the application, and then I'll put the application up with the amendment if that is carried. Okay, members? So you can use your show of hands if you like.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Thanks. That's it. Okay. Okay, members. So what we're now putting to you is to vote for the approving the application with the amendments that you've just voted for. So if you can indicate to Jane whether you're for, against, or you're abstaining. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heath-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Obliged.
Councillor Ivor Lloyd. Councillor Ivor. He must have left the meeting.
No.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you. That's 11 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. That's carried, members. I move on to the next application, which is 0/48082. It's the removal of double garage and proposed attached double garage with annex extension at 39 Overley Avenue, Deganwy. And we have speakers for this. So I'd first like to invite Mr. Peter Lloyd, who is speaking against. Mr. Lloyd, you have 3 minutes to address the committee and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining.
Can you ensure I'm in the waiting room, Chair?
Yes, sorry, bear with me, Councillor Peter.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Peter Lloyd, are you there?
I'm here now.
Good time. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Members, thank you. It's rare I ask you to set aside an officer's recommendation to grant a permission. In this case, rejecting their advice and refusing permission is the correct thing to do. The scheme proposes a kitchen dining room and a living room and enclosed balcony at first floor level and an ensuite bedroom and a lobby and a study with stair access at ground level. Excluding the garage or balcony, the space exceeds DQR sizes for a typical 2-person, 1-bed flat. I urge you to judge very carefully whether this development, scale and character is reasonably ancillary and can be annex accommodation or is tantamount to a new dwelling. The purported replacement, and dare I say ill-described garage, adds further floor space, yet is substandard in both size and shape and is unsuitable for its stated use. The LDP sets clear policies for the size, scale and design of developments, including extensions. These are usually applied consistently by officers. This proposal, however, starkly conflicts with the principles normally applied in your Household Design SPG document LDP1. 3 principles: that extensions shall be significantly smaller than the house, that they should have a lower ridge line than the house, and should be sufficiently set back from the front of the property, or for reasons the report fails to set out, ignored. Committee members saw the site yesterday, and I hope you will appreciate just how important it is your principles are applied here. The balance and harmony of this semi-detached dwelling on a highly prominent open corner garden and the street scene would be seriously damaged by this scheme. Officers advise you the balance is more in keeping than an existing barely visible detached garage, and that the development is considered to not have a significant or detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the locality. But this misapplies policy DP3. No material considerations justify the principles being disregarded here, so I speak for Mrs. Lloyd living directly opposite. I emphasise that policy DP3 requires development to be appropriate to and enhance its locality in terms of its form, scale, massing, elevation and detail. To conclude, I will paraphrase a well-used appeal main issue. This proposal has an unacceptable effect on the character and appearance of the street. It does not achieve the design quality or placemaking objectives required by Building Better Wales or Planning Policy Wales. It contradicts your SPG and accordingly conflicts with policy DP3 of the LDP. You should reject it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. I now invite Mrs. Helen MacArthur, the applicant, speaking in favour. Mrs. MacArthur, you have 3 minutes to address the committee and you will be reminded with 30 seconds remaining. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair. Thank you both to yourself and also to the councillors for the opportunity to speak today in relation to my planning application. I don't intend to attempt to address any of the technical planning matters that have been raised within the objections. This is clearly beyond my own professional knowledge and experience. However, you will note from the responses by my agent that we consider that the application is compliant with the planning rules and regulations, and I genuinely hope this to be the case. Today, instead, I would like to address 2 issues that have been raised. Firstly, my intentions in relation to the property, and secondly, the perception that the annex would impact on the privacy of my neighbours. You will note from my own response to the concerns raised that it is absolutely not my intention to develop a separate dwelling, which I could sell on if I was so desired. For me, resilient communities start with resilient families, and you, as elected authority members, will be more than aware of the housing and wider issues facing our communities today. Depopulation of the younger generation, due in part to the housing pressures, and meeting the needs of an ageing population who struggle to retain their independence and live with dignity, being just two of these factors. These two issues alone are acutely personal to me, and my own motivation, indeed my only motivation for this project, is deeply and firmly rooted in supporting the immediate and longer term housing and social needs of me and my family. Turning, if I may, to the second issue, I have noted the objections raised, which appear to focus around the loss of privacy arising from the inclusion of the balcony. My property currently has side and rear aspect windows, which overlook the gardens of my neighbours. Indeed, my neighbours have windows and a balcony which overlook my garden. And this has never been problematic in all of the years that I've lived in the property, which exceeds 15. The position of the balcony is consistent with the existing windows, and therefore I don't believe that it further reduces the privacy of my neighbours. And thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. MacArthur. Thank you. I'll bring in the planning officer now to update us on the addendum. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. There's nothing in the addendum. Thank you.
Fine. Okay, members, over to you. Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The site visit was very useful yesterday because we were able to stand in the garden of this this application site and look along the row of houses, Overley Avenue, quite a few of which had protruding balconies. Now this balcony is not going to be protruding. As the applicant has said, it's just going to be in the line of the existing windows. The rear of the property looks down onto a house on St Hilary's Drive, which there are no windows for anyone from the application site to look into. So I have no problem with this application. There are big houses with big gardens along Overley Avenue, and really the design of the extension seems to be in keeping with the houses that are along there. So I would like to go with the officer's recommendation on it. I propose that.
Propose it. Thank you, Councillor Chris. I've got Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. It appears from what the applicant has said that part of the consideration is housing an enlarged family. If by that she's going to house her mother or an elderly relative, it can only be a good thing. It is one of the things that we're trying to get people to make decisions about their care as they grow older, and this is somebody that seems to be wanting to do that. I must say I find it admirable, and I would like to second this application.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Dave Rees. Councillor Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Do apologise for I've got connection issues today. Hence I was a bit late attending the meeting. I was just going to second Councillor Chris Cater on this application. I think it's well within keeping of the design of the houses within this particular area, and as I say, it's in keeping, and I would like to second the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. I haven't got any other members up on the screen who want to speak. We have had a proposer and a seconder to approve the application as per the recommendation. So perhaps I can bring in the legal officer, Lisa.
Hi, Chair.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Smith. I've just been advising him on an interest matter. I'm just double checking with him he's comfortable to continue. Is he there?
Yeah, the order.
Sorry, Lisa, I missed that. I do apologise. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, Councillor Nigel Smith is directly.
Yes, he's left the meeting.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, Councillor Nigel Smith may have declared an interest. I'm not sure, but he's left the meeting anyway. So, okay, sorry, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that advice. Anyway, thank you. Okay, members. So we've had a proposal and a second to approve the application as per the recommendation. So if you can indicate to Jane whether you're for the approval or against, or you're abstaining. Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis. Declared an interest and left the meeting. Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Obliged.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Obliged.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Nigel Smith has left the meeting because he knows the applicant. Councillor Ken Stevens.
In favour.
And Councillor Trevor Stark.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. That's 10 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you, members. That's carried. Move on to the next application, which is code reference 0/47990. Yeah, if you could allow Councillor Nigel in, Jane. This is the erection of 21 dwellings comprising of 8 two-bedroom houses, 8 three-bedroom houses, and 5 two-bedroom bungalows with associated parking, access and infrastructure, land off Plaza Penryn Bay, Llandudno. We have no speakers for this, so I'll hand over to the planning officer, which is, I believe, is where are we, Dave?
Yes, it's me. Thank you, Chairman. Dave Watson.
Yeah. Dave
Just
Watson,
in terms of the addendum, members, the Town Council Llandudno, they recommend approval, but they express concerns about the displacement of parking and also highway concerns regarding the access and increased traffic as a result of the development in what is already a busy area. The Highway Authority doesn't object, and subject to conditions. It recommends conditions: pre-commencement approval of a scheme of highway improvement works, pre-commencement approval of a construction method statement, pre-construction approval of full engineering, drainage, street lighting and construction details of roads proposed for adoption. The Senior Environment Officer hasn't raised any concerns but requires a construction method statement. The Housing Officer has clarified in terms of the tenure of the proposed units. The tenure mix is 9 social, 12 intermediates, of which 6 would be intermediate rent and 6 would be rent first. And she says that this meets demand, and it is the mix that we aim to achieve as described in the local housing market assessment, with a 50-50 split of social and intermediate. And she's clarified about the rent first tenure option. It's different to a rent to own option, but there is an option to purchase after 10 years, but no obligation. The ecologist says that the amended layout hasn't significantly changed the ecological impact. The approach is still to retain most of the boundary vegetation which is the most valuable ecological feature. And provided that there's a comprehensive landscape and enhancement scheme, then the scheme is acceptable ecologically. She requests a condition to require a revised landscaping plan and a condition for measures to avoid impacts on wildlife during the course of the development. been 2 further letters of objection received, which raise the following points. The first one is supportive of 100% affordable housing, but it says the rent to own tenure will not provide 100% affordable housing in perpetuity in line with TAN 2 definition. And the rent to own can eventually be sold at market value on an open market. Stricter mechanisms should be put in place to ensure the units remain affordable in perpetuity. And the shared ownership option should be the only option within the 106 planning obligations for the rent to own type properties. She also refers to the significant need for social rented units within the area, whereas the application is dominated by intermediate affordable options. And so the social rented units would be more a beneficial tenure for the local community to overcome perpetuity issues and align with housing need within the application and the LHMA. Further points, which are similar to the points raised, are already listed in the main report. Just as a reminder to members, this is an application that was amended and resubmitted and validated on the 23rd of March. So the publicity consultation period runs until the 21st of April, which is after the committee meeting. So again, we're seeking delegated authority from committee to consider the representations received after committee and to determine under delegation. In light of the consultation response from the housing section, and to ensure that the development provides affordable housing to satisfy policy HOU2, officers are recommending that a section 106 planning obligation to require the development is only carried out by an RSL. We're not suggesting any other restrictions in the section 106 to cover the affordable housing on the basis that it would be carried out by the RSL. The officer recommendation is also amended because the impacts on highways, ecology and archaeology have been resolved to the satisfaction of the development and building control manager. So the amended recommendation is minded to grant conditional planning permission subject to consideration of the outstanding consultation responses, provided the impacts on trees are resolved, and subject to a section 106 planning obligations in respect of affordable housing and commuted sum payments towards open space and waste provision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Alan Hunter. Councillor Allen?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was on the site visit here yesterday. It's a fairly untidy piece of land, but what they're proposing fits right into an already existing housing estate, and I think it would lend itself well. What ticked the boxes for me was the housing mix. We often sit at committee and despair at the lack of bungalow accommodation and 2-bedroom accommodation, and for me this is just ticking everything that we usually have concerns about. So I'd like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Dave Rees.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was on the site visit there yesterday, and again, I agree with Councillor Allen. You know, this is exactly what's needed in our development plan, and I'd like to second Councillor Allen's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. I've got next speaker, Cynghorydd Tristan Lewis. Cynghorydd Tristan.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Oedd yn llaw I fyny ddim ond I eilio yr hyn a ddywedwyd, ond mi oeddwn ni ar yr ymweliad safle ddoe. Mae o'n union fel y dywedwyd, yn union beth yn isio o ran tai fforddiadwy a chyfle I bobl leol ardderchog. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch yn fawr. Right, I've got Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I noticed a couple of comments yesterday when we were on the site visit about the closeness of the caravan units to the boundary, but the back gardens of some of the proposed units will be against that boundary, and hopefully it'll be a big improvement from the very scruffy field that is there at the present. I went down Farringdon Court, which is the street that's immediately south of the caravan park, and I noticed that the caravans are right up against the back gardens there, much closer to the houses on Farrington Court. So in fact, the design that is proposed will be far better than what I saw at Farrington Court. So as a local member, just like to impart that knowledge that I think the way the houses have been and the bungalows, because yes, there are some bungalows and we need some bungalows for elderly disabled people. That's important in the community. Affordable housing shouldn't just be for young families, as important as that is, but there are elderly people that need affordable housing as well. So yes, I'm happy with this application. It's a shame Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams isn't here today, because she proposed this land for 100% affordable housing to Cabinet in 2016. So here we are 5 years later and it's coming to fruition. So well done, Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel. He did indicate he wanted to speak, but
sorry, Chair. Yeah, I just love the fact that it's bungalows. I think in 7 or 8 years I've been a councillor on this planning committee. It's the first time we've seen bungalows coming forward in numbers, so I really do welcome it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Ivo Lloyd, cynghorydd Ivo.
Diolch, Cadar. Ie, dwi'n croesawu y math yma datblygiad. Mae'n neis gweld rhywbeth wneud i ein pobl ifanc sy'n cychwyn ar y siwrne prynu tai, a hefyd i pobl sydd yn eisiau ymddeol. So diolch. Dwi'n cefnogio 100%.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr, Ifor. I haven't got any more speakers down, and I have had a proposer and a seconder to approve the application as per the recommendation. So if members can indicate to Jane whether you're for approving it, against it, or you're abstaining. Jane?
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
O blaid.
Councillor Ivo Lloyd.
O blaid.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
O blaid.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
Councillor Travis Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. That's 11 in favour and 1 abstention.
Right. If you just bear with me, members, I'm just checking my notes against the addendum, and I'm just trying to assess which is the next application. So if I get it wrong, I'm sure Jane will put me right. According to mine, we've got the change of use. Code reference 0/48187, proposed change of use of tattoo studio to self-contained flats at 57B Mostyn Avenue, Craigydon, Llandudno. I'll ask the planning officer to bring us up to date with anything in the addendum.
Chair, if I can come as vice chair. Oh, sorry, Jane coming in.
Yeah, just you're all almost right, Councillor Trevor, but we need to consider 48264 first, the telecoms one, Abergally.
Oh, right.
48264, page 106.
I think it was my script writer that just got things just a bit altered. So yeah, so it's I knew it would happen on the last meeting. So I'll go off the, this is the cafe one, Jane, yeah?
The Market Street, Abergele,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
48264.
The last one on the, it's the final one, Councillor Trevor, on the paper agenda. Right at the back.
No, I haven't got that one, I'm afraid. There's a glitch here.
No, 6, Chair.
Just bear with me. I do apologise, members. Yep. All right, okay. Yeah, sorry, members, I do apologise. 0/48264. It's proposed base station installation, the telecoms prior approval at Market Street Works, Market Street, Abergele. And I'll ask the planning officer to come in and explain. I think it needs explaining about the prior approval as part of the application. So if Mr. Kerry Thomas could address the committee. Thank you, Kerry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's these prior approval ones are never straightforward, but effectively the local authority has to make 2 decisions, and it has to make those decisions within a 56-day period, which is very important that whatever decision you come to is concluded today. But firstly, the procedure is that the applicant has to notify the local planning authority and apply for a determination of whether prior approval is required for the siting and appearance of the structure. If the local authority, if the committee decides that prior approval is required, then it has to determine whether prior approval is granted or refused. If the local authority determines whether the prior approval is not required, then the development can proceed anyway. So the order is rather convoluted in the way it's worded, but essentially you need to come to 2 resolutions, and it may be more straightforward if you take 2 separate votes. So the first vote would be on whether prior approval is required or not required. If prior approval is not required, then there's no need for a second vote. If prior approval is required, then there will need to be a second vote to determine whether prior approval is granted or refused. There is a representation update. You'll be aware that the Highway Authority has expressed concern that the position of the mast could conflict with proposals to upgrade the footway into an active travel Wales route. The agent acting on behalf of the applicant has asked whether there is a possibility of, has basically asked when those works are due to take place, and Highways have responded that it depends on grant funding. The works could take place later this year or next year, but we can't be sure about that. So effectively, the officer recommendation is to determine that prior approval is required and refused, partly because of that, but also because of impact on the setting of historic buildings. And I can show slides to the members if they wish to see them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. If members consider that. I've got, in the meantime, I've got Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
And I put my hand up a bit previous, I'm sorry, but I
Okay.
Having heard Kerry's explanation, I'm quite happy to go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel.
Yes, I'm happy to second Andrew's proposal that the prior approval is required by the local planning authority. So I'm happy to second that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I haven't got any other members down to speak. Oh yeah, we have got Councillor Ivor.
Yeah, os yn bosib jyst I gweld y lluniau gan y swyddog Kerry Thomas, please.
Okay, I'll ask
Yep,
Julia
I
to
think we
share
can do that.
the screen, please. So if Julia, if you could go down to slide, well, if you show slide 2 first of all. So this shows where the location of the site is. So it's close to the roundabout, the Tesco roundabout on Market Street. And you can see the, on the right-hand side of the image, you can see where Slater's Garage used to be. If you could go to the next slide, please, Julia. So this shows the height of the structure, and you can see a comparison between the existing structures. So you've got an existing bus shelter to the left, you've got existing lighting structures to the right. As you can see, it will be higher than structures in the immediate vicinity. Could you go to the next slide, please, Julia? So one of the listed buildings in the vicinity is the former primary school, which is now a community centre. And that's on the on the left-hand side of the image. It's a Grade 2 listed building on account of its association with a particular architect. The mass structure would be located immediately behind the bus stop that appears towards the centre of the image. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is a similar, a closer view of the community centre. The next slide, please. So this is a view looking away from the community centre towards the site, and beyond you've got the terraced housing along Sea Road, which is included within the conservation area. Next slide, please. This is a similar view taken with a slightly greater magnification. The next slide, please. So this is looking in an easterly direction. So it's looking from Llandrillas Road in towards the site, and you can see the roof line of the former Slater's building, and beyond that you can see the tower of St Michael's Church. St Michael's Church is designated as a listed building, so the position of the mast would have an impact on the setting of the church, especially when viewed as you're approaching the town centre. I think that's nearly all the slides. I think if you just go on more slide, apologies for the image quality, but that's a similar view of the existing, that's a similar view in the same direction. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. I've got...
Ie, yr unig pryder sgennau di yr impact efo tan 24 digwyr, bod yr eglwys St Michael's ddim yn bell digwyr o rhywbeth sydd yn cymharol rhywun uchder. Mae'n rhaid i sôn am hynny yn pwynt 20 dydach yn yr adroddiad. Be di barn y swyddog ar hynny, swch dda?
Da ni yn credu y bydda datblygiad yn cael effaith ar gyffiniau. Yn gyntaf, mae'r ardal gadwraeth. Mae rhan fwyaf ganol Abergele wedi cael ei glusnodi'n ardal gadwraeth. Mae safle Tesco a Slaters wedi cael ei eithrio o ffin yr ardal gadwraeth. Ond mae ffin yr ardal gadwraeth yn ymgylchynu'r safle i bob cyfeiriad. Felly, da ni yn credu bysa lleoliad y mast yn cael effaith andwyol ar yr ardal gadwraeth, ac hefyd ar osodiad adeiladau rhestredig yn enwedig yr hen ysgol ac eglwys St Michael.
Diolch.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Councillor Ivor. Yeah,
diolch.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Nigel Smith.
Yes, Chair. Hello?
Councillor Nigel, I think you had your hand up earlier.
Ah, sorry. I should have took it down.
Okay.
Okay,
not
thank you,
to worry.
Councillor Nigel. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew?
Same here, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I haven't got any other members asking, so we've had have we had a, oh, sorry,
Chair.
can I just bring in the legal officer before we go to the vote?
2 minutes.
Can I ask Lisa to address?
Yes,
Lisa?
sorry, I was just asking, can I just ask for some clarification on the proposal, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Lisa.
Yep. I'm just asking members to clarify, are you proposing to go with the officer's recommendation? So that would be determining that prior approval of the local planning authority is required for the siting and appearance of the development, and to refuse prior approval in respect thereof. If that's the proposal, then you can take that to the vote.
That's
It
what I
is a proposal, but
propose.
we were informed by Kerry that we'd have to take 2 separate votes. But if we can take it in one, then we're happy to do that, Lisa, I think.
If Kerry's happy, if that's the proposal that it's all encompassing, then I think 1 vote's fine. And it you know, it's going to be more confusing having 2. I think if you agree with the entirety of the recommendation, then if Kerry's happy, yes, he is.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree. I think
Lisa.
it makes it simpler because one is it relates to the other one, doesn't it? So yeah. Okay, members. So we've had a proposal and a second.
Sorry, Councillor Stott. I think Kerry wants to come in. He's got his 2 hands up.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to lower my hand. I'm trying.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I do apologise.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members. We've had a proposal and a second to mind it to determine that prior approval is required, and to refuse prior approval in respect thereof. So can you indicate to Jane whether you're for, against, or you're abstaining? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis. Councillor Tristan, are you there? He may have left the meeting. Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Obliged.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. That's 10 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. We now move on to application 0/48152 to provide existing cafe with external seating area delineated by planters at 162 Conway Road, Colwyn Bay. And the planning officer got any further remarks regarding the addendum?
Nothing further to report, no.
Okay, thank you. Any members wishing to speak? I haven't got anybody down. Does anybody want to make a proposal? Or Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe. Councillor Andrew.
I propose we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter. Peter Lewis.
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Okay, members, if you indicate to Jane again whether you're for the proposal to approve, or and we have it seconded, can you indicate to Jane whether you're for, against, or you're abstaining? Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams. Sorry, my mistake. She's left the meeting. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Tristan Lewis, are you back? No, must have left. Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Obliged.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Nigel Smith. Councillor Nigel. Okay, I think he may have left the meeting. Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
And Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you, members. That's 9 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. I hope I've got this right again with these papers. The next one I've got down is 0/48206. It's the proposed new TV gantry and associated accommodation to provide required facilities for the League of Wales at Colwyn Bay Football Club, Llanellian Road, Old Colwyn. Planning officer.
It's the wrong application, Trevor.
Is it? Is it? I do apologise. I've got these papers all over the place. I've just been following the updated addendum.
If
Well,
we
I've
do,
got,
sorry, go on.
I've got
Sorry.
48187, which is
The
the one
tattoo
referring to
studio.
Moston Avenue.
Yes, the tattoo
right.
studio, page 77.
I do apologise and thank you very much for helping me out there, Peter. It's 0/48187. The proposed change of use of tattoo studio, self-contained flat at 57B Moston Avenue, Craigie Don. Does the planning officer want to add anything further to the addendum?
There's nothing in the addendum. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Andrew, you're muted.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to go with the officer's recommendation. It's a big change to a shopping street to make a shop into a flat. So I absolutely go with the officer.
Okay, Councillor Peter Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go against the opposite. I accept that officers are tied by TAN 15. I also note that the Town Council is supporter of the application. And I think we should give more credence to the improvements outlined in paragraph 17 in the report. And it's also classed as a low-risk surface water flooding. And I think, as indicated in the report, there is a need for much-needed housing. It is on previously developed land. And I think, as was reported at the last meeting, any likely flooding has come from the sea. And there is proposed flood defence improvements in hand, which will mitigate any future flooding. And I think, given the fact that this is an existing empty property, it would at least bring it into use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've got, let me see, Alan Hunter. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll keep this brief because Peter's just said everything I was going to say. I would be against the officer's recommendation and Councillor Andrews' proposal on this for the same reasons as Peter, really. We've got enough empty shops if somebody wants to open another tattoo parlour, but we've got very little space for people to have dwellings, so I would be happy to go against the recommendation, which we'll have to do at this point with just the one proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I've got Councillor Chris Cater.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a funny little shopping, sort of side shopping area. It's not actually it's not actually part of the shopping zone of Craigydon. Shops have always struggled a bit here, and I went along to the post office because I was sure that post office was shut there. So I went along this morning, and it has been shut for 2 years. And I asked the owner whether it was likely to reopen again after the pandemic and so on, and he said definitely not. So this shopping centre is contracting, and I have to say, going there this morning, that the outside, the shop front is definitely not attractive, and I think the proposal will improve the outside. Just to refer to Councillor Andrews' point there, I think this will be an improvement. So, you know, we're within the settlement boundary. We're outside the designated conservation area in Craigydon. Llanero Town Council recommend approval. They don't have a problem with it. I noticed in the report that there's a bit of there's a mention of the funeral director next door. Well, in fact, I've got in Penryn Bay, the funeral director has a residential property in the same building right next door, and there doesn't seem to be any problem with that. So I would go along with Councillor Peter's view that the negative impact of an empty shopfront, which it's not attractive at the moment, remaining empty for the foreseeable future, would really be worse for the amenity of the locality. It's a shame we haven't got Owen Connery here about the flood risk zone, because I do realise it is in C1, and members will have heard me talk about previous applications in Llandudno, which NRW have opposed because they're not happy with the Waterco hydraulic modelling, which was done in 2020. They want it updated, quite a number of updates and things. Well, really, there are a lot of ground floor flats in Craigydon, some on Victoria Avenue, which is in fact lower than Mostyn Avenue. So before this property on Mostyn Avenue would be flooded, you would have extensive flooding on the streets before you get to the prom. So I think I would, on balance, really support Councillor Peter with this and go against officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Councillor Ivor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. I too, all things considered, looking at what's ahead of us, the betterment of the sea defences in the Llandudno area, thanks to the crump, which is a very strange word, I know, at the crump funding. So being a C1 and mitigation being available, and also the crump support, I think that I can confidently say that we could, probably look at supporting this. So, diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Councillor Ivor. Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered if we had any photographs of this building so we could have a look what it looks like right now. Do we have any photographs?
Chairman, we do have some photographs we can show you.
Thank you.
If you go through them, please, just. And just for confirmation there, clarification, it's the cream-coloured shop front that you can see with the funeral directors is the one to the left-hand side looking at the picture. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Perhaps I could bring in, whilst we get the pictures, actually, the way perhaps they could bring in the Lisa, our legal officer. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to confirm, just before we go to the vote, members have obviously listed many reasons there for going contrary to the officer's recommendation. So I'm assuming the planning officers are happy with the reasons that have been given. And just to confirm that the application will have to be reported back to the next planning committee in accordance with protocol.
Yeah, members. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously just for members to be aware, you know, it may be possible for NRW to apply for a call-in in light of their concerns, but I'm sure the planning officers will advise you if that's the case.
Yeah. Thank you for that advice, Lisa. Okay, members, I haven't got any more after Councillor Ken.
Sorry, I think Councillor Ken and Councillor Peter wants to come in.
Councillor Ken.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back. It's already a mix of housing and shops already, isn't it? It's not exclusively shops. It's obviously, as Councillor Chris was saying, a secondary sort of shopping area. So I don't think it would make that much difference if this was converted. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ken. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether it would be helpful if I sort of summarise the reasons for going against the officer's recommendation. One is that it supports much needed housing. It's on previously developed land. It brings an empty property into use. And I think the other issue is that the proposed flood defence improvements will mitigate against future flooding.
Yeah, I think the officers have taken that on board now, Councillor Peter, but thanks for reiterating it. So members, I'll put it up then. We've had a proposal and a seconder, which is to approve the application with the reasons that have been outlined by Councillor Peter. So if members could indicate to Jane whether you're for, which is to approve the application, or against, or you're abstaining. Thank you, Jane.
Chair, can I just ask, did Councillor Hinchcliffe actually make a proposal that we went with the officer's recommendation? And if he did, is he going to withdraw? Because we'd have to go with that proposal first, I think, unless he didn't have a seconder.
I didn't have a second.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough. That's fine.
And anyway, I thought it was the junction before, so I'm not really
withdrawn. Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, if you can indicate, Jane, if you could ask the members, this is to approve the application.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Lloyd.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Austin Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Ken Stevens. Councillor Ken, are you there? You're on mute.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. And Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Okay, thank you, members. That's 9 in favour and 1 abstention.
Okay, so members will remember that because they've gone against the officer's recommendation, it will come back to the next planning committee for ratification or otherwise. Okay, so we move on to fingers crossed 0/48152 to provide existing cafe with external seating area delineated by planters at 162 Conway Road, Colwyn Bay. So planning
done
officer
that
got anything further to add?
Councillor
Sorry?
Trevor, I think
We've done that one.
we're moving on to
We've done it again. I've
Llanelli
done it
Road.
again. I do apologise. I've got these papers all in it. It would be on the last meeting, wouldn't it? So I do apologise. So we now got the Llandudno Cricket Club one. Is that right? Yeah.
48206.
48, the Llanelli Road, Old Colwyn, Colwyn
All right,
Bay
yeah.
Football Club.
Okay, so it's 0/48206. Proposed new TV gantry and associated accommodation to provide required facilities for the League of Wales, Colwyn Bay Football Club, Llanelli Road, Old Colwyn, Colwyn Bay. Has the officer got any further? You're on mute.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Alan Hunter.
Just propose we go with the officer's recommendation on this one. It's nice to see them getting somewhere.
Councillor Allen. Yeah. Councillor Dave Rees. Councillor Dave.
I'd like to second Councillor Allen's proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Okay, members, I'll put it to the vote then to approve the application. So if Jane could ask you how you want intend to vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Phil Capper.
For.
Councillor Chris Cater.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
For.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
For.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd.
Lloyd.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
For.
And Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you, members. That's 8 in favour and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. And I think the next one is 0/48213. Proposed new raised viewing terrace to the front of existing clubhouse, along with new disabled access, the sports pavilion, Llandudno Cricket Club, the Oval, Llandudno. The planning officer, any further remarks to make?
Yep, Chairman, thank you. Dave Watson here. The Town
Yeah.
Council recommends approval. Thank you. That's the only update in the addendum.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ivor.
Okay, symud yr argymelliad os gwelwch yn dda.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
Come on. So I'll second Ivo.
Thank you, Councillor. Alan's withdrawn his hand. Yeah, okay. So we've had a proposal and a seconder to approve the application. So if members could indicate to Jane. Jane?
Okay, thank you, members. Councillor Philip Capper.
4.
Councillor Chris Cater.
4.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
4.
Councillor Alan Hunter.
4.
Councillor Peter Lewis.
4.
Councillor Ivo Lloyd. Councillor Ivo Lloyd.
O blaid.
Councillor Dave Rees.
4.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
4.
And Councillor Trevor Stott.
Abstain, Jane.
Thank you, members. That's 8 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Before I close the meeting, members, can I remind you that the next meeting has been moved from the 12th of May to the 18th, with site visits scheduled for the 17th. So you might need to rearrange your diary then for that. And since it's the last meeting in this council year, could I thank the members for support and all the hard work in very challenging times that we've had over this last 12 months, and members have been superb. And I'd also like to thank the planning officers and the legal team for the support and professional advice that they've given to myself and the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Chris Cater would like to come in.
Yeah,
Councillor
just thank you for those kind words, Trevor, and congratulations on another successful year chairing the committee. And as you say, what a strange year it's been, and just remembering that April planning committee meeting last year where we were the first to do it remotely in North Wales, I think, and so successfully and well chaired by yourself. And I just would like to just reinforce some thanks to you personally for all your hard work in very strange times. So thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Chris. It'll be nice. Hopefully, one day that we'll actually get to see each other in person in the chambers. I'm sure these Zoom meetings can cover up a multitude of scenes. So thank you very much, members. I do appreciate it. So diolch yn fawr, and diolch o galon, and hwyl fawr.